Unfortunately, in recent months, I've been seeing more and more videos of underwater fishermen diving to 30, 40, 50 meters. Be careful, Long. Let's watch these videos with the eyes of someone who knows that if they want to do this, they really need specific training that lasts over time. But I don't want to discuss the fact that, in my opinion, this type of fishing takes us away from a bit from what the true essence of going for a nice dive is, enjoying the sea, and especially exploring the shallow waters. Unfortunately, fishing is becoming just like going to the supermarket, picking out the biggest fish, taking it, and maybe even reselling it. And this is really destroying the spirit of fishing, but above all, the sea. Same goes for other videos of people fishing in the shallows with carbon spear guns, all complex. In reality, if you are good, especially in shallow water, you can fish with the handle of a broom and the elastic of your underwear, just like Tapirante used to say. And I wanted to make a video where fishing in very low cliffs, you can fish with any weapon, with any gun, because the fish can reach 20 meters. And today you will see just that. And now I'm taking you underwater. Let's go.
Today I'm going to dive at a reef that I know very well. We're in Lazio, and it's been about 10 years since I last dove in this spot. It's December, the water is cold, and the sun is low. This will be a factor during the fishing, but I won't be able to avoid going against the sun in some spots. The reef in question is a semi-submerged reef, about 300 meters long. I'll start on the left side, where there are usually some sea bass. In the center, however, it's always full of mullet and bream. And on the right, I remember there used to be some nice bream, but now I don't know anymore. Along this reef, the water is very shallow, ranging from 50 centimeters to a maximum of 3 meters. You don't need to be a great free diver, but you do need to be good at not making noise and getting close to the fish. As usual, I'm using my wooden spear gun. This is an 80 centimeter spear gun, and it's the famous coral type, monoelastic, very fast and practical for this kind of water. I decide to use the technique I like the most, which is ambush. I take a breath without letting the fins out, and I dive, moving very slowly along the reef, trying to intercept some nice prey. And when necessary, I'll stop, hoping it comes closer. There's a lot of particles in the water, and you can't see very well. However, you've already seen a small school of anchovies. Far from the camera's eye, I see a school of mullet. They're not huge, but it could be a good start to the day. I get closer, trying to intercept them. Unfortunately, I'm against the sun, and it's not easy to see them. The school swims past me on the right, and I'm trying to use this rock as cover. Some are a bit bigger, and you can see that in this murky water, fishing against the sun sometimes helps. It was a pretty long shot, and among the crashing waves, I managed to easily retrieve this mullet that ended up on the line. I quickly reload the spear gun. That's the beauty of having a simple and not too complex tool, because in this shallow water, it's much easier to handle. And I move to the center of the reef. In front of me, there's a big school of bream. But here it's really hard to fish because the waves are almost higher than the bottom, and they prevent me from moving quietly. The fish, in fact, notices me and swims away, although not quickly. So much so that a wave suddenly knocks me over. So I decide to move to the other side of the reef and try to position myself with the sun at my back. Here, the environment is very unique. On the bottom, in fact, it's full of rocks of what we call trembles. They're nothing more than sand structures made by some worms that create huge underwater formations, rich in burrows of all kinds of life, from fish to octopuses to small invertebrates, crustaceans, and shrimp. These structures are extremely fragile and are built in no time. The noise might attract some sea bream or sea bass, but you can't see anything. Since I don't like to sit there waiting for Pisces that never come, I decide to implement my usual ambush tactic. Not only because it is a little more productive for me, but above all, because it allows me to explore the territory with a very long freediving training. I always look to my right and left, and even though the rock in front of me is productive, I can see a nice school of mullets to the right. So I turn more than 90 degrees and start to get closer. I look to the left, and then there's a solitary mullet on the right. As you have seen, you don't need any special freediving skills, but you do need to know how to observe the area, move like a hunter, and try not to scare the fish, even if it has seen you. I'm doing a series of stalks that end with the ambush. This mullet, as you saw, was part of a huge school that passed by on my right, so I turned the speargun. Then, the biggest one came into view, and I caught it. In front of me, there's a big school of bream. These fish are extremely suspicious, but if you move carefully, you can get close to them. At this point, the current is very strong and it's pulling me back and forth. Watch the movement of the fish. You need to imitate the same movement and let yourself be carried by the current, while still staying close to the bottom without letting your fins rise. I'm checking the school of bream, hoping there might be some more interesting fish. However, this time there are no fish. Only a few mullets are passing by on the surface, but they're small and not worth it. Now, another problem begins. Unfortunately, the visibility here is starting to decrease significantly, and the water is full of particles. It's much harder to see from the mask. Also, if you notice, I loaded the spear gun incorrectly. I didn't bring the right elastic on the top of the gun, but honestly, I didn't notice it in the water. I'm still freediving and moving around trying to spot some nice prey. Look at how rich the seabed is in life compared to the granites of Sardinia. Everything depends on the shape of the rocks. These rocks, in fact, are much more porous and life can easily take hold on their surface. Now I have the sun perfectly behind me, and in front of me I can see a school of mullets. I aim at the biggest one and shoot. Even with the elastic twisted, I managed to hit it perfectly. As you saw, I don't do any stalking, but for me, ambushing is the most effective technique in the shallows. Unfortunately, even though this spot is rich in fish, it has become too murky and I'm forced to head back, moving against the sun. I decide to go down to take a look under the Tremolina burrows to see if there is anything interesting. But apparently, the stormy crusts have silted up this area a little. However, the idea of going to explore down there fascinates me, and I make several dives to see what I might find. Beyond the fish, being underwater is beautiful, especially because you discover incredible things, but mostly because we're in an environment in a world that isn't ours. For example, in this area of Lazio, it's not hard to find old pieces of amphorae. They even date back to the Romans, when ships transported jars and amphorae full of oil and other food. In this case, I found a bottom. Here, it's really full of these artifacts, and I usually leave them on the seabed, unless they're valuable enough to take to a museum. Some museums have some pieces that I've found. While going up and down, I suddenly noticed something unusual on the bottom. There are 3 big white stones on the bottom, and that's quite unusual. The nearby spot could be the den of an octopus. In fact, the octopus is there and it's also very big. I'm waiting a second to figure out what to do. At first, I think I can pull it out directly with my hands. However, the den is deeper than I thought, so I'm forced to swim back up to look for a better solution. I'm taking the opportunity to remove the stones in the way. In fact, the octopus would cling to the rocks in its den, making it even harder to pull it out. By now, he knows I'm there and he's been disturbed anyway. I try to poke it with the tip of the spear gun and I see that it still reacts. Very well. All that's left is to catch my breath and go back a second time. This might seem cruel to many. In reality, it's much more cruel to buy octopus at the supermarket than who knows with what destructive techniques it was caught. I only take one a month and eat the whole thing, without any waste. Now I'm sneaking up on it with the spear gun and the octopus is coming out of its den. Many might comment that it looks like a small octopus, but my hand is actually very big. And especially the GoPro distorts, making all the catches look smaller, but I assure you this octopus weighed about a couple of kilos. A great catch. To kill it without making it suffer, you cut between the eyes and the octopus will almost immediately start to change color and go limp. After the octopus, I decide to dive again to try to catch some other fish. On the bottom I see some strange pieces that seem fused together, but I can't get them off. So I continue with my fishing. In front of me, there are some interesting rocks. I look underneath. And above all, I try to focus ahead, hoping those mullets will come closer. They're circling around the rock. The best thing to do is to move. But in doing so, I'm clumsy, and I bang the spear gun against the rock. The mullet notices and swims away. As you can see in the shallow water, it really takes very little to scare the fish, so you have to pay close attention. Further ahead, I notice something special. It's an old rapala, too so old, and it must have been there for who knows how many years, with all the paint gone and even part of the wood. Underwater, I've always found a lot of lures, and often when I didn't have any, I filled my tackle boxes. I keep moving to the right of the cliff. The water here is already much murkier compared to the previous part. The technique, however, is always the same. Long waits and in the end, some action. In the distance, you can see some mullets, like shadows. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to watch them. I'm looking for the right moment, but the visibility is really low. At a certain point, I see one a bit bigger, so I get closer and shoot. I thought I hadn't hit it, but instead I nailed it perfectly. While doing this, the first GoPro turns off, and I'm forced to grab the camera I had in my hand. With great difficulty, I managed to move the camera I had in the grip and put it on the mask. At this point, I choose a completely different strategy. That water is very murky, in fact, and there is no point in ambushing it. It's much better to wait at the base of the rocks and then move slowly to see if any fish come closer. However, I can't stay still in this distressing murky water, so I move slowly. As soon as I move, a big mullet materializes in front of me. The fish, however, is quite scared and won't come close. Also, the gun is too long and I can't swing it quickly. But I took a really difficult shot, and it worked out. The mullet was perfectly caught, and it's also a great specimen. The fish. Fortunately, there it is. However, I'm almost at the end of the cliff. I've got the sun in my face, and the water here is definitely murky. This time, you really understand the limits of having a gun that's too long when the conditions call for a shorter, faster one. However, I have this weapon and I have to adapt. I try to wait a bit even though I'm facing the sun, but it's really tough against the sun. It's easier to see the shapes of the fish that are coming closer. As I scan to the right and left, suddenly I find myself face to face with a fish I wasn't expecting. The camera will see it before my eye, precisely because it has a wide angle. It's a huge mullet, but I'm slow to move the gun, and the fish swims away. But it could come back, so I decide to wait again. I dive exactly in the same spot, and this time I stay still. But the water is getting murkier and murkier. And compared to what you see with the camera, I see even less. It's been a while since I fished in these conditions, and I'm used to the crystal clear waters of Sardinia. I keep turning around, almost fearing that at any moment a fish might materialize. And so it happens, in the shadows. The mullet swims by. I see it at Malapena, but unfortunately I miss it. In the next dives, the water became really murky. But the mullets are there. They just pass by me too quickly on the right and left. I can't aim at them, and I can't see anything at all. Here, even with a shorter spear, I wouldn't be able to do much. Further ahead, luckily the water is much clearer and I can dive down without any problems. The mullets swim past me, but these aren't big. On the left, at a certain point, a bigger mullet approaches. It's a shot that's impossible to miss. This last shot makes us realize that you don't need incredible camouflage or super complex spears to fish in these waters. I'm just an ordinary fisherman. I don't have any exceptional skills. But I do enjoy diving every now and then, catching fish and eating it. In the following week, I ate both the octopus and the mullets. I even enjoyed the mullets raw with a bit of lemon, salt and oil, the best way to eat fish after catching it. Even in this dive, I could have continued fishing and had an even richer catch, but would it have made sense? In my opinion, the key word is sustainability, catching, just enough for a dinner or a lunch, as I always say. Let's not exaggerate, and above all, let's remember that the sea isn't a supermarket and fish shouldn't be resold. And we'll see each other in the next video.